click the outward 4-arrow button in the upper
Good day, everyone, and welcome. This is Ray Ford with FDA Center for Drug Evaluation and Research Small Business and Industry Assistance Program, also known as CDER SBIA. Thank you for joining us today for our presentation on Study Data Standards Update for CBER, your guide to a successful submission. CBER will discuss CBER's support and requirements starting March 15, 2023 for the standards for the Exchange of Nonclinical Data, also known as SEND, which was published in the Federal Register on July 14, 2020, and the addition of SEND for CBER to the FDA Data Standards Catalog. For your convenience, we've included QR codes to access SBIA on LinkedIn, Twitter, and YouTube. Scan the QR code with camera on your cell phone. This will provide you with a link to SBIA on the platform for the QR code that you scanned. Just to remind you of some upcoming events on October the 11th, we have our FDA Nano Day Symposium 2022, and on October the 26th, we have a webinar. It's an in-depth look at the final FDA guidance, bioavailability studies submitted in NDAs or INDs, general considerations. As a reminder, the webinar will be posted in its entirety on our website within 5 business days, and that website is fda.gov/CDER SBIA Before we begin, we have a few details we'd like to share with you. Slides for today's presentation are available from the right-hand side of your screen where the orange button says Download the presentation. This activity is eligible for an attendance certificate which supports continuing education by SOCRA, RAPS, SQA, and ACRP. Please refer to our website at fda.gov/CDER SBIA for more details. You will be able to obtain the attendance certificate only upon completion of a survey, which will remain open for 2 weeks. That means the survey will close on October the 19th. Please remember to download the certificate immediately upon completing the survey. It cannot be retrieved after the fact, and you lose this opportunity. Additional tutorials are available through fda.gov/CDER Even if you don't need the certificate, we'd appreciate it if you let us know your comments and feedback via the survey. To outline today's event, the webinar in its entirety will run approximately 1 hour, which includes a Q&A session. And if you have questions now or during the webinar, please enter those questions into the Q&A chat pod. We'll answer as many questions as time allows. Our speakers for today's webinar include Lisa Lin, Study Data Standards Manager, Data Standards Branch, Office of Regulatory Operations, CBER, and Gabriela Lopez Mitnik, Project Manager, Data Standards Branch, Office of Regulatory Operations in CBER. Please join me in welcoming our first presenter for today's webinar, Lisa Lin.
Thanks, Ray, for the introduction. Good afternoon, everybody. We are so excited about today's presentation. My name is Lisa Lin, and I also have my team member, Gabby, with me. Gabby and I are going to present you for today's webinar. Here's the overview of this webinar. We will first introduce to you what you need to know about CBER's requirement and the support on SEND, which is Standard for Exchange of Nonclinical Data. We will share with you some of the issues we see from current SEND data we got from the non-clinical study submissions. On clinical data side, we will share with you CBER validation process of clinical study data and some common data issues we see in clinical data submissions. Last but not least, We will also share with you some of our FDA resources. So does anybody know what is CBER's requirement date for SAND? Are you all aware of CBER's announcements regarding requirement on SAND? Some of you might know in July 2020, CBER has added CDISC SAND Implementation Guide version 3.1 on FDA Data Standards Catalog for non-clinical data standards, with the requirement date for March 15, 2023. FDA will not accept an electronic submission that does not have study data in compliance with the required standards specified in FDA Data Standards Catalog. Through a couple years of strong and well-resourced collaboration between CBER review team, CDISC SAND team, and industry volunteers, the team has assessed the special needs from CBER non-clinical reviewers, performed a gap analysis between reviewers' needs with current SAND implementation guide. The team has also performed the proof of concept pilot on multiple studies submitted from industry and made robust recommendations for CDISC on future standards development. Now we are ready to implement SAND for CBER. CBER has also published a Federal Register notice in July 2020, announcing the support and the requirement for SAND. Here's a screenshot of the Federal Register notice, and on the left you can find the link of it. Please feel free to click on the link to read when you have a leisure moment. As you know, CBER has implemented technical rejection criteria for clinical data. But for non-clinical data, the implementation will begin March 16, 2023, following the exact same process as CDER. Technical rejection criteria requests sponsors to submit TS.XPT, either simplified or full SAND data, for all the non-clinical data submissions, if the submission includes study report. Otherwise, sponsors would get error 1734. FDA automated validation process uses the parameter of study start date in TS.XPT to tell if the study start date is after requirement start date, which is March 15, 2023, for IND submissions for CBER. If the study start date is after the requirement start date, the system will check if the submission includes DM dataset and define.xml in Module 4. If these are not included, the error 1736 will be issued. Once the SAND data comes into CBER, data will be loaded into SAND Explorer tool for reviewers to review. The process starts with a notification of a new BLA IND submissions with .xpt files in them. The Data Standards Group keep a log of all submissions with non-clinical data, as well as those just contain the ts.xpt file. Data Standards Group loads SAND data in SAND Explorer immediately after receiving the submission data. Data Standards Group grants access to all non-clinical reviewers to SAND Explorer. Reviewers use SAND Explorer and Jump Clinical for visualization, data query, summarization, and all other analysis. Here I will show several examples of the data visualization from SAND Explorer. This graph shows the body weight change over the time for each group. You can see from the right-hand corner there are 4 different groups, and the x-axis shows the days from the treatment start, either before the treatment start date or after the treatment start. The y-axis shows the body weight. So this gives you an overview of these 4 treatment groups, the body weight change over the time. graph shows the temperature change over the time for each group. Same like there are 4 groups, and over the days, before the treatment and after the treatment. And on the y-axis, you can see the temperature. So for this temperature, especially it will be a big concern if the temperature is over 40 Celsius. This is a microscopic findings table. You can tell from the color and the number to see if the finding result is remarkable or not. This is a screenshot of the study data loaded in Sand Explorer with some basic information users can customize, like application ID, study ID, sponsor reference ID, treatment, species, study title, study type, study start date, domains, loaded date. Then you can click on each study to get more details for that specific study. So far, CBER has received over 100 studies with SAND data, which we loaded them into SAND Explorer tool for reviewers. And we found some data issues which causing the studies not be able to load it or partially loaded. For example, some studies contain domains with duplicate IDs, like in pool depth domain, pharmacokinetic parameters domain, and food and water consumption domains. In this case, the study is partially loaded without those domains containing duplicate IDs. Some studies could not be loaded because TS or TX domains were not submitted. There are also some studies with subjects having missing reference start date in DEM domain, which is a required field. Now I'm going to turn it to Gabby, who's going to talk about CBER study data validation process for clinical data.
Thanks, Lisa. Here is a short description of how is the CBER study data validation process. It starts with the notification of a new BLA or IND submission coming in with data. Most of the time, the review teams are aware of the data coming in, so the amendment or the new data is expected. The CBER Data Standard Group keeps a log of all submissions coming in with data. Once CBER Data Standard Group receives the notification, we will communicate with the review team to perform the study data validation. Once the validation is done, the Data Standard Group discusses the validation results with the review team. And if it's necessary, the review team will send an information request to sponsor requesting clarification and additional information. Here we will show some of the common issues we encounter from the validation process. We organize them by different domains. So starting with adverse event domain, one of the common issues we encounter is the inconsistent coding of the exact same verbatim value coded differently using the same meta version within the study or between different studies in the same submission. For example, here you will see the in yellow highlighted part showing the same verbatim value coded as a different dictionary term and lower level term. Continuing with adverse event, here there are some other common issues listed. Adverse events have neither severity or toxicity grade populated. There are adverse event and SDTM adverse event domain that are not present in ADAM adverse events and vice versa. Treatment emergent flag in SDTM is not consistent with treatment emergent flag in ADAM, and there is no explanation in the reviewer's guide. ADAM treatment emergent flag is not equal yes, but the analysis start date is within the treatment period. Serious adverse events are missing seriousness criteria, such as did the adverse event result in disability or permanent damage? Did the adverse event result in prolonged hospitalization? Did the adverse event result in death? Adverse events outcome is not consistent with adverse events end date. Usually, when an adverse event outcome is recovered or resolved, there should be an adverse event end date. When the adverse event is ongoing, means that not recovered or not resolved, the adverse event end date should be missing. Most common issues in CE: start date, end date, or start relative to reference time point of clinical events are not provided for reactogenicity data. Clinical events have neither severity or toxicity grade. Clinical event duration determined inaccurately. Multiple rows for one event, one subject. Maybe this is due to different severities, but it should be one row subject event vaccine administration in CE. Severity is maximum severity during the assessment period. CE path should be used to indicate if it is a single event, continuous, or intermittent. Here there are some issues with the DM domain. Subjects present in another domain but not in the DM domain. Missing variables like sex, race, country for treated subjects. Missing important dates in DM, like reference start date, reference end date, date of first study treatment, date of last study treatment, date of informed consent. We also saw some issues in the medical history, like inconsistent value of MHD code and another MEDRA coding for the same MH term. Some issues in labs. The standard unit missing when standard results are provided. Inconsistent unit values for the same lab test. Missing reference range upper or lower limits in standard units. Reference range indicator equal normal, but result is greater than normal range high. Here there are some issues that we saw related with dates. Medical history event dates are after treatment start dates. Records in different domains like AE, CE, CM, DA, etc. with data happen after end of participation day in DM. Events are missing start and end time points like in AE, CE, or EC. Here we listed some issues that we saw in the documentation, like incorrect file names such as reviewers-guide.pdf or defined XML instead of CSDRG PDF or defined XML. Documentation such as annotated CRF or defined located in the wrong folder instead of the same folder as the dataset. No bookmarks or wrong bookmark in the SDTM Reviewer's Guide or defined XML. No annotation in the CRF. Inconsistent version of MEDRA listed in the defined XML and SDTM Reviewer's Guide. Variables listed as derived, but no computational method is provided. Or a derivation reference to variables in raw data, but the raw data is not submitted. Domains reference in defined XML, but dataset is missing. ADAM datasets were submitted, but they were not listed in the ADAM defined XML. Submit a defined XML for a different study. No explanation of issues in Reviewer's Guide. Here there are some other issues that we observe. Inconsistent variable length across different domains. A study subject with missing baseline flags for test presence in the dataset. Data submitted in the wrong folder, for example in M1 instead M5. Missing value for one or more MEDRA variables. Comments provided in other domains like subqual instead of comments domain. So here are just some examples of some common issues that we encountered during the clinical data validation process. We hope you can validate the data before the submission and try to eliminate any data issues or provide some explanation in the reviewer's guide for the issues that you couldn't resolve. So that can help to the reviewers to conduct a more efficient review of the data. As a summary, we want to let you know that CBER is ready to support SEND data for non-clinical study submissions. We have the tools ready, including SEND Explorer, JAMP Clinical. The requirement of SEND data submission for CBER is after March 15, 2023. And also we hope you can pay attention to the data issues we share for clinical and non-clinical data, so you can provide quality submission data for reviewers to conduct efficient review. For any discrepancy, please explain them in the reviewer's guide. In here, there are several resources for you to review. Also, here is the email for any questions regarding study data submission to CBER. That concludes our presentation. We will now respond to the question that you submitted.
Thank you for the great presentations, and we'll now transition into our Q&A panel session. As a reminder, if you haven't had a chance to enter your questions into the Q&A chat pod, please do so now. We'll answer as many questions as time allows. If you're directing your questions to a particular speaker, please preference the question by adding the @ symbol and the speaker's name in front of the question, such as @Lisa or @Gabriela. Looks like we have a few questions coming in right now. And the first group of questions will be directed to Lisa Lin. And here is the first question. Does this information on SEND datasets also apply to CDER and IND and NDA submissions?
So basically, according to the TCG or our FDA Data Standards Catalog, what the SEND is applied for IND and the data set as well for any IND submissions under Module 4. And the only difference between CDER and the CBER process mainly is about the date, requirement date, and the support date. So for that information, please refer to FDA Data Standards Catalog for the requirement date. So as you know, CDER requires SEND data set earlier than CBER, and CBER requires after March 15, 2023. Thank you.
Thank you for responding to that question. We do have a few more questions for Lisa Lin, and here is the next question. Does the SEND data requirement also apply to academic submissions starting in 2023?
According to e-study guidance, currently for the IND submission, it doesn't apply to academic submissions. Any research type of studies doesn't need to be conformed to the SEND format. So that's not applicable for any academic research type of study. Thank you.
Thank you for responding to that question. We do have one more question in this round for Lisa Lin, and here is the question. Are non-clinical data sets requested in CDISC format for an IND applicable to toxicology, preclinical safety study data, or applicable to all non-clinical data sets, also including pharmacology and POC study data?
So for the requirements according to the FDA Data Standards Catalog, like for SAND IG version 3.1, that only applicable to single dose toxicity, repeat dose toxicity, and carcinogenicity study, and safety pharmacology study. So all the requirement for SAND data is also be consistent with what study types supported by CDISC SAND IG. So that's your reference, see what type of study needs to be sent in SAND format. Definitely refer that to the SAND IG, depends on which version is required by CBER and CDER. Thank you.
Thank you for responding to those questions. Moving on to our next panelist. We have a few questions that came in for Gabriela Lopez Mitnik. And here is the first question. What kind of errors might we encounter with legacy data conversion?
We don't validate legacy data. The errors that we mentioned is data that is in a standard form, so even if it was converted or not. Thank you.
Thank you for responding to that question. We'll move on to the next question for Gabby, and here is the question. Please specify which module sections send datasets are required for CBER.
The minimum data set to meet the technical rejection criteria is to submit a simplified TS XPT. That's the way of referring, basically, and after all the models that you consider necessary for your study. Thank you.
Thank you for responding to that question. We've got a couple more questions for Gabby, and here is the next question. Please give details about limited TS requirements for study start dates prior to 3/15/2023.
The TS requirement, the simplified, it contains like four variables that you can see details in the implementation guide. It's the study ID, the TS parameter, and the TS val, and the TS val NF. Thank you.
Thank you for responding to that question. We have one more question that just came in for Gabriela, and here is the question. Is a reviewer's guide mandatory or recommended for dataset submissions?
It's recommended. It's highly recommended. It's a big help for reviewers. Thank you.
Thank you for responding to those questions. Moving back to our first panelist, we have a few more questions that came in for Lisa Lin, and here is the first question. Does the March 2023 timeline, is it also applicable to the study conduct date or the NDA submission date? In other words, if the study is taking place before March 2023, but the report is issued after March 2023, do we need to submit, including send?
Yeah, the date we mentioned here is the study start date. So that is the study initiation date. So for any study started after March 15, 2023, you are required to submit send data, but not the submission date. So that's a great question. Thank you.
Thank you for responding to that question. We've got a few more questions for Lisa Lin, and here is the next question. Could you please elaborate on the send data loading issue for the domains with duplicate IDs?
Yeah, so for that study, what we saw is some of the domain, as I listed on the slides, they have duplicate subject ID. So when we load, it got some issues. So I think that's usually, by these domains, it shouldn't have duplicate IDs. So I hope that answers the question. Thank you.
Thank you for responding to that question. We do have one more question for Lisa Lynn, and here is the question. If the study began prior to the cutoff date, is it acceptable to provide the simplified ts.xpt file to show only the start date for SEND datasets?
Yes. So if the study started before the requirement date, you just need to send simplified TS. Basically, the parameter shows us the study start date, and then the system will check if the study start date is before the requirement date. It will pass the gateway and not requesting any full send data. Thank you.
Thank you for responding to that group of questions. Moving back to our second panelist, we do have a few questions that came in for Gabriela Lopez Mitnik. And here is the first question, and it's two questions. What are SEND datasets, and what is the difference between SEND datasets and ts.xpt files?
Well, SEN stands for Standard for Exchange of Nonclinical Data, which is a set of data sets, or we call domains, of non-clinical study data. TSXPT, this is the dry summary, is one of those data sets. If no SEN dataset will be submitted, you still need to submit like a simplified TS-XPT to meet the technical rejection criteria. Thank you.
Thank you for responding to that question. We do have a few more questions that came in for Gabriela, and here is the next question. How many SEND packages are you receiving every quarter?
So far, CBER has received over 100 studies with SEN data. Thank you.
Thank you for responding to that question. We do have a couple more questions for Gabriela Lopez Mitnik, and here is the next question. What, if any, are differences in the expectations for SEND between CDER and CBER?
Yes, our CBER process is exactly the same as CDER. Following the Data Standard Catalog, CBER is not required sending DART at this time. Thank you.
Thank you for responding to that question. Moving back to Lisa Lynn, we do have a few more questions that just came in. And here is the next question. Prior to implementation date, is it okay to submit in other formats such as Excel?
If you don't send data, if you are not required to send data, you can just still send the study report as you currently do. You don't have to send in Excel data in Excel format. Just send in the study report. That's fine. So that's the Adobe Acrobat file currently we receive. But if you want to send data, just send data even before the requirement, since we are supporting send data right now. So even it's before the study requirement date, you can also, submit send data. Thank you.
Thank you for responding to that question. We do have a few more questions that came in for Lisa Lin, and here is the next question. Will the Send IG v3.1.1 only be applicable for CBER submissions or v3.1 as well? It's not clear in the Study Data Standards Catalog.
Yeah, so in current FDA Data Standards Catalog, both Send IG version 3.1 and 3.1.1 are listed for CBER. So either version is fine for CBER. You can choose whatever version, because the only difference is the PCPP anyway, and most of the study of CBER doesn't have that included in the study submission. So any version you want to use, that's fine. Thank you.
Thank you for responding to that question. Got a few more questions that came in for Lisa Lin, and here's the next question. What types of quality assurance processes needs to be done during the submission process?
So there are a couple validation process. One is, as you know, the technical rejection criteria. CBER will have that turn on March 16, 2023. So for these errors, if the system got errors for the send submission, then it will be rejected at the gateway. Once it comes through the gateway, the data or the submission comes to the review division. If we find that there are any data quality issue or review issue, you will receive the notice from RPM usually about some information request or clarification or other issues, will be mentioned. But mainly, if you want to process the validation before your submission, please follow the CDISC validation rules, for standards issue, and then follow the CBER, not CBER, FDA business rule as required by FDA for send submission. Thank you.
Thank you for responding to that question. We did just receive another question for Lisa Lin, and here is the question. How much guidance do submitters receive when an error has arisen with a submission?
This question is similar as just my response earlier. So basically, as I said, starting March 16, 2023, at the gateway, it will start validation going through the gateway for the TRC, the technical rejection criteria. And then once that comes in, it will go through our CBER process, and the reviewers will request any information request or clarification if we find any data issues. Thank you.
Thank you for responding to that group of questions. Moving on to our other panelists, we do have a few more questions that came in for Gabriela, Lopez, Mitnik, and here is the first question. In converting old study data to SDTM standards, and if you have an issue in the Pinnacle reports and explained it in the reviewer's guide, is there any cutoff for rejection on the basis of number of open issues?
there are two different things. The rejection are specific for a specific error. So if the study is rejected, we don't see it. But if there are a number of issues that the validation that going during the validation process, you may be required to respond to a letter or to those numbers of issues. There is no number of issues that you simply you need to answer the letter if you receive any inquiry. Thank you.
Thank you for responding to that question. Before we ask the next question to Gabriela, we'll give her just 1 second to adjust her microphone just a little bit. And here is the next question for Gabriela. Do clinical data sets apply to SEND?
SEND is for non-clinical data. So the answer is no. So no for clinical. It's just for non-clinical data. Thank you.
Thank you for responding to that question. And one final question that just came in for Gabriela is the following. Does a biodistribution study that has been conducted to non-GOP standards need to produce SEND data sets?
Currently, biodistribution studies are not in the scope of sending, so it is not required for SEND datasets. Thank you.
Thank you for responding to that question. Moving back to our first panelist, we have a few more questions that just came in for Lisa Lynn. And here is the first question. If you find serious issues in the validation process, how can I be informed about these issues?
Yeah, so that's, I think, the similar question as the first couple I answered. So as I said, like if there's errors from the technical rejection criteria, it will be rejected at the gateway and with messages and reasons why it's rejected. Once it came through the gateway, it will go to the review division. And then if there's any issue with the data at that time, review division will notify you. Thank you.
Thank you for responding to that question. We do have a couple more questions for Lisa Lynn. And here is the next question. Is there going to be any SEND training?
CBER does provide the SEND training to reviewers. And then CDISC also has SEND training to industry. I think if you guys need to get trained, you can either get training course from CDISC or from, I guess, your company can organize those through CDISC. Thank you.
Thank you for responding to that question. We just had one more question come in for Lisa Lynn, and here is the question. If my SEND data is not in the proper form, will it be rejected?
Yeah, I'm not sure what you meant by the proper form, but as I said, the current process is, the first is the technical rejection criteria implementation at the gateway. So if there are several errors I presented earlier about if these errors happen, then the study will be rejected at the gateway. And then once it comes in, it will go through the review process. Thank you.
Thank you for responding to that question. Moving back over to Gabriela, Lopez, Mitnik, we do have a couple more questions that came in. And here is the first question for Gabriela. When submitting a simplified ts.xpt, is a define.xml required?
Define is always helpful to submit along the data, so that gives the reviewers a big help to go through the data. So it's highly recommended.
Thank you for responding to that question. We've got a couple more questions that came in from Gabriela, and here's the next question. Is SEND separate for clinical data, or is clinical and preclinical data both required to be in SEND format?
Send data is for non-clinical data, and basically is in I don't know if the folder, the M4 folder. Clinical data is in a completely separate folder, it's an M5 folder, so they're two different things. Thank you.
Thank you for responding to that question. We have one more question for Gabriela. It just came in. And here is the question. How does FDA read the defined file?
The defined XML usually is open in Microsoft Edge, and as I mentioned before, this is where reviewers can find all the definition of the data, the code, and all the information necessary for them to understand the data. So it's a key file in the submission. Thank you.
Thank you for responding to that group of questions. Moving back to our first panelist, we do have a couple more questions that came in for Lisa Lynn. And here is the first question. Is the immunogenicity specimen domain required for immunogenicity?
We do have this update in the TCG, the FDA Technical Conformance Guide. So basically, IS is not currently required. So for immunogenicity data, you can submit in the LB as well, but the intention is, include IS in the future. IG can be required for send. So like currently, I think if you want to send in IS, that should be fine, as a like customized data set. But it can also be submitted in LB. Thank you.
Thank you for responding to that question. A couple more questions just came in for Lisa Lynn, and here's the next question. Can data be converted to send after data collection?
Yes, I think so. Every company has different process, so it depends on how company collects data, and you can also convert data in send format and submit in the send format. So any way that leaves to the company's decision how you were to send data. Thank you.
Thank you for responding to that question. Do you have another question for Lisa Lynn? And here's the next question. Are many packages rejected, and do you know a percentage of the packages that have been rejected?
So currently, since we haven't started implementation on the send data yet, so there's no rejection on send. For clinical, we did have some rejection so far, but it's a small percentage from the CBER submissions.
Thank you for responding to that question. One more question for Lisa Lynn, and here is the question. In converting old study data to SDTM standards, and you're still having issues, believe we've already answered that question. 1 second while we review. Giving just our audience just a few moments to submit a few more questions. Looks like we've answered the majority of these questions. We're just going to take a momentary pause while our panelists review some of the incoming questions. We just had a question that came in, and this is again is directed to Lisa Lynn, and here is the question. Once the data passes the TRC, can it be rejected later during review?
I guess if the data comes in and the reviewer find it's not clear enough for them to proceed with reviewing or doing analysis, that could still be rejected by review division. So that's we do want you to have really quality data come into the agency, and whatever you can do to help reviewers to review the data, do analysis of the data. Thank you.
Thank you for responding to that question. We've got another question that came in for Gabriela, Lopez, Mitnik. And here is the next question for Gabriela. How does the agency define raw data? And this is referencing slide 23.
When we mention raw data, there is, for example, if sometimes there are variables that they are derived from raw data or from other data sets, and those data sets are not in the submission. So for this reason, we flag it as an issue. We cannot replicate where this variable is created if the raw data is not in the submission. I'm sorry if we weren't clear there. Thank you.
Thank you for responding to that question. Looks like we've answered all the questions that have come in pertinent to the presentation at this time. We're just going to give just a momentary pause. We got just two that came in for Lisa Lynn. Moving back over to Lisa. And here is the next question for Lisa. In the previous question, it asked only if the start date should be in the ts.xpt file. But does the ts.xpt file not have 4 variables?
Yeah, for the simplified ts.xpt file, currently the example we showed in the TCG is 4 variables. So these are the basically the study ID, those reference to the definition of the study, because we do need those details. So it's not only just start date, but start date is one of the important variable parameter we confirm with the requirement date. But yeah, the other 3 variables are also needed. Thank you.
Thank you for responding to that question. It looks like we have just one more question, and it's directed to Lisa Lynn. And here's the question. For a study that starts prior to March 16th, 2023, is only simplified ts.xpt acceptable, or do we need to submit the full SEND dataset?
Yeah, so since we already started supporting SEND dataset, feel free to send in SEND datasets. It doesn't matter if it's not required for your submission, your study, but you can still send in SEND data. Or you can send a simplified ts.xpt. So it is your choice. We do, so far as Gabby just mentioned, we did receive over 100 studies with SAN data from the last year to this year. So since we started supporting them, so yeah, that's your choice. Or we recommend you to send in SAN data if possible, because that way also help us to doing the analysis by using the SAN data and also doing some validation. Thank you.
Thank you for responding to that question. We just received one more question directed to Gabriela Lopez Mitnik, and here is the question. Could you please give more details about other issue, inconsistent variable length on page 25? This may be slide 25, but it says page 25. Does it mean the same variable should have the same length across all data sets?
Here what we mean is that it's convenient. If there are two variables, the same variable in two data sets, it's convenient they have the same length. So the merge and all the analysis is easier and going smooth. It's not they should, but it's something that's convenient for the people that are working with the data to have this consistency. Thank you.
Well, we'd like to give a huge thank you to our panelists for their very informative and timely talk, and also for responding to numerous questions that came in. We do have a few closing reminders. Remember, this activity is eligible for attendance certificate, which supports continuing education by SOCR, RAPS, SQA, and ACRP. Please refer to our website at fda.gov/CDER SBIA for more details. As a reminder, you'll only be able to obtain the attendance certificate when you complete the survey, which will remain open for 2 weeks. That means it closes on October the 19th. Please remember to download the certificate immediately upon completing the survey. It cannot be retrieved after the fact. Let us know your comments and feedback via the survey. This will help guide the design of our future events. Additional tutorials, many of which have CEs, are available through fda.gov/CDERlearn. On behalf of CDER Small Business and Industry Assistance, we hope you enjoyed today's presentation and found it helpful. We look forward to your presence at future webinars, which will be advertised on our website at fda.gov/CDER SBIA. Thank you for attending, and this concludes today's webinar.